3, 2, and 1.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here this evening. Mr. Rozier, do you want to go ahead and take roll call when you can, or when you're ready? I'm getting discouraged here.
1 second, sir. Okay, we'll begin in alphabetical order. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Jason Burdine,
Here.
Allison Drew,
Here.
Addie Helliger,
Here.
Grail James,
Here.
Jim Rice,
Here.
Dave Rosenthal,
Here.
Kristen Tassan,
Here.
and for staff, Diana Saavedra,
Here.
Brian Gwynn,
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Anthony Indelicato,
Yes, sir, I'm present.
Beth Martinez,
I'm here.
Oscar Perez,
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Long Pham,
I'm here.
David Ryder,
I'm here, sir.
Joe Rodriguez,
I'm here, sir.
Robert Scamardo,
Rob is out, sir.
Veronica Sofer,
Veronica Sofer here.
Gwen Touche,
This is Gwen. I'm here.
Board Counsel Rick Morris,
Here.
and Dr. Charles Dupree.
I'm here for the moment.
Mr. President, everybody is counted for except for Mr. Scamardo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rozier. The time is 6:07 p.m. and this meeting is hereby called to order. We have the presence of a quorum attending on a video conference, and notice of this meeting has been posted online for at least 72 hours. On March 26, 2020, Governor Greg Abbott granted a request by Attorney General Ken Paxton to temporary. Dr. Dupree, can you please mute your microphone?
Sorry.
Thank you. On March 16, 2020, Governor Greg Abbott granted a request by Attorney General Ken Paxton to temporarily suspend a limited number of open meeting law to the extent necessary to allow telephonic or video conference meetings in response to the COVID-19 coronavirus. In accordance with those suspended rules, Fort Bend ISD certifies the following. Although members of the board are not gathered in a central physical location, we do have a quorum in attendance at this meeting by video conference. This meeting is being held by video conference because the convening at one location of a quorum of the governmental body is not appropriate during the COVID-19 public health emergency. Based on current guidance from federal, state, and county authorities concerning large gatherings and social distancing during the COVID-19 public health emergency, there is no established location for an audience to observe the meeting. However, the live stream of meeting video and audio is available and accessible through a YouTube link that was timely and appropriately provided to the public and media as part of the meeting posting through a news release and via the district's website. As we would at any in-person meeting, members of the public who have followed the standard instructions for registering to speak during the public comment portion will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. All other meeting procedures will adhere to the board adopted procedures to the extent practicable. Even though this meeting is being live streamed on the district's website and on the district YouTube channel, an audio and video recording of this meeting is being made and will be available to the public on the district's website. First on our agenda this evening is our pledges of allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic
For which it stands,
One
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for the Texas pledge. honor
Honor the Texas
flag. I pledge
allegiance to the Texas,
Texas,
one
one
state,
state,
under
under
God,
God,
One.
one
indivisible.
indivisible. Please remain standing for a silent invocation. You may be seated. Internet is a little bit spotty, so excuse me if please tell me if you cannot hear me. All right. Next on the agenda will be our recognitions. Mrs. Veronica Sofer, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, President Burdine. We'll wait for that PowerPoint presentation to come forward, and then we will celebrate the amazing accomplishments of our students and staff here in Fort Bend ISD.
Mr. Burdine, do you want to make a statement about the power?
Yes, actually, before we get started, I want the audience this evening, whoever's listening, that the administration building in Sugar Land is without power right now. Some are operating on generator power, like Dr. Dupree. Others are operating on battery power. So we're going to change the agenda this evening. After we do our recognitions, we are then going to do our audience items, and then we're going to do our consent agenda. So all those who are listening, please understand if there's any issues, we will get back as soon as we possibly can. I myself have had some intermittent internet issues, so please be patient. Go ahead, Mrs. Sofer, whenever you're ready.
Yes, thank you very much. First, we're going to celebrate Anushka Agarwal, a freshman at Dulles High School, and Madison Burke, a freshman at Travis High School, and they were honored for their project, Pure, the water purification process. We're also going to recognize Sanskriti Manoran for her project, and she was a member of this amazing team from Quail Valley Middle School with our other people that we're recognizing. I'd like to point out that these 3 students were named to the top 300 from among 3,000 entrants at the Broadcom Masters International. And this is sponsored by the Society for Science and the Public. And this group works to expand scientific literacy, effective STEM education, and scientific research. So congratulations to these former Quail Valley Middle School students. And I'd also like to celebrate their teachers, Carol Benjamin, Elizabeth Fox, Jerlinda McGee, and a big thanks to one of their assistants, Jeanette Morales. Moving on, we have an outstanding student from Garcia Middle School. We're going to recognize Zain Ziad. I think it's the next slide. We might be having some technical problems there, but Zain was chosen as the 2020 National Ambassador for the Do the Right Thing campaign, a writing campaign for middle school students. He was one of 2 chosen from the Houston-Harris County area, and Fort Bend ISD had a total of 16 students who advanced to the final. So I'd like to take a moment to recognize those students, if I may. From Dulles Middle School, we have Justin Lee and Michaela Wolf. From Fort Settlement Middle School, Charlotte He and Samuel Coe. From Hodges Bend Middle School, Dustin Howard and Van Doe. From Bowie Middle School, Ethan Garza and Yuretsa Bettis. From Lake Olympia Middle School, Bradley Garcia and Mary Levin Okei Roffer. From Garcia Middle School, Najan Falo and Zain Ziad. From Missouri City Middle School, Haley Hawkins and Mason Gibbs. And from Thornton Middle School, Ian Harper and Isabella Santu. So congratulations to our students. That's a huge accomplishment for Fort Bend ISD. And we also have another outstanding recognition. This is for our powerful assistant principal at Colony Bend Elementary School, Ms. Sweta Correa. She was selected as a member of the ASCD 2020 Class of Emerging Leaders. She is among 21 exceptional educators accepted to the program. ASCD is a nonprofit dedicated to excellence in learning, teaching, and leading. The Emerging Leaders Programs is made up of educational leaders who have made an impact in their school communities. So a big congratulations to Ms. K. Ray. We appreciate her so much. Next, I would like to give a huge shout out to for Fort Bend ISD, who was among this year's honorees of the 2020 District of Distinction from the Texas Art Education Association. The district received this honor for providing a well-rounded education that advocates and integrates visual arts curriculum to inspire creativity and reach all learners. So a big thanks to all of our art teachers, all of our fine arts staff that support all their work. They've done a phenomenal job, and it was a great honor for Fort Bend ISD to receive this distinction. And this concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Sofer. Congratulations to students and our staff for being recognized this evening. I always enjoy that portion of the board meeting. I wanted to make another quick announcement for those who are just logging on to the meeting, our audience, that we are having power issues at the administration building. Some are running on battery power, others are running on a backup generator. We may have a few issues through this evening, so we are going to do our best to navigate that. We are going to have our audience items next, and then we will do our consent agenda and our action items. So just so everyone's aware that we will try to get through these the best we can until we move on to our presentation for administration about our COVID-19 update. So with that being said, we have our audience items next. I will read the name of the person registered to speak and share that they have 3 minutes to make their comments. Prior to speaking, the speaker must share their video and unmute their microphone. Once the speaker starts his or her comments, Mr. Rozier will announce when they have 30 seconds remaining. And once the 3-minute time limit has expired and whether or not the speaker has concluded his or her comments, Mr. Rozier will announce that the time has elapsed, mute their microphone, and remove them from the meeting. So with that being said, Mr. Alan Morrell, whenever you're ready, sir, please state your name, and whenever you want to get ready, go ahead.
My name is Alan Morrell. I'm not able to show the video, but
okay.
Hopefully my microphone is working.
Yes, sir, we can hear you just fine. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, well, thank you for this opportunity to speak. Again, my name is Alan Morrell. I have 2 seniors in Fort Bend ISD, a son and a daughter. They have each found a love of theater and dance thanks to the incredible fine arts staff and facilities in their school. And as a father, I can't thank you enough for that and for the opportunities they've been given. But this is also the reason why I'm compelled to speak to you tonight. I'm deeply troubled by the overburdensome COVID requirements placed on fine arts by the administration. These requirements run contrary to the CDC, the governor's requirements, and UIL requirements. They do not reflect any other organization's requirements and seem to be simply the opinions of the administration. These requirements make it impossible for fine arts students to achieve a high quality education in their chosen disciplines and represent a tremendous inequality of opportunity versus what athletes are being allowed to do within Fort Bend ISD. Now, I understand new guidelines were just released in the last 2 or 3 hours by the administration regarding fine arts specifically. And I'm encouraged by some of the changes that were made, but I'm also extremely discouraged by a lot of the things that were left in. In particular, the spacing requirements, 100 square feet around every student for band, theater, and dance when indoors. I don't know how you're able to perform under those kind of conditions. Requiring that students wear masks even when performing in theater. You cannot have a voice that goes out to the entire audience when you're wearing a mask. And they require that they maintain at least 6 feet and wear a mask. Those are contrary to CDC and UIL. Within UIL and CDC, they only require a mask when you cannot be more than 6 feet apart. They still don't let anyone change clothes while at school. If the dance team cannot change into their dance attire for class, how can they have dance class? Same with theater. If they cannot change into costumes, how can you have a play with no costumes and wearing a mask? It seems very contrary to success for the students in that regard. And it's contrary to a lot of the requirements that have been laid out by UIL and the governor's office. UIL references the governor's order GA-29 from July 2nd. GA-29 specifically says Any person while exercising
30 seconds
outdoors,
remaining.
while exercising outdoors, engaging in physical activity can maintain a safe distance, but they don't have to wear a mask. But dance team is still required to maintain 7.5 feet from each other. Any person while giving a speech for a broadcast to an audience doesn't have to wear a mask. So why is theater required to wear a mask? We just want the same opportunities for our fine arts students that to excel that other students are being given. That's all we want is an
Time
opportunity.
has elapsed.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you being here this evening. Our next speaker is Ms. Tammy Marino. Ms. Marino, whenever you're ready, go ahead and start. Ms. Marino, can you hear us?
Mr. President, she is on the line, but I'm not hearing her.
Okay, we'll give her a few more seconds here.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you. You can begin whenever
am I
you'd like.
coming in clear? Okay, thanks. I had the pleasure of attending the Fort Bend ISD Leadership Conference where Simon Sinek was the guest keynote speaker. One quote from the Infinite Game that stands out for me is, "People will trust their leaders when their leaders do the things that make them feel psychologically safe." Respectfully and fully appreciating the complexities of all involved, stakeholders are not feeling psychologically safe right now, and it's not because of a virus. Instead, decisions are being made in silos, inequities are being created, and staff, students, and parents are not feeling safe. I was happy to hear earlier today that changes would be made to the fine arts restrictions that were so much more stringent than other district activities. Thank you for listening. This shows that community feedback can be integral to keep vital programs thriving. With that in mind, it was recently brought to my attention that without any input from campus librarians, their budgets were cut 70% in order to build a district-wide ebook library, which is to be finalized on 9/25. On the surface, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Many people enjoy ebooks, and expanding district offerings seems reasonable. Aside from the fact that there hasn't been much demand from the student population and decisions are being made unilaterally, even though different campuses have distinct needs, the problem is that most of the ebooks are single user, cost 2 to 3 times more than a physical book, and expire in 2 to 3 years. A librarian could buy 3 of the new Hunger Games for what one ebook costs, and the hard copies would last far longer. Aren't our online students having enough screen time with their classes? And what about the face-to-face students who won't be allowed to do independent reading on devices? These ebooks won't serve those students at all. A wise librarian recently told me she builds her campus collection with books that are mirrors and windows. Mirrors so the students can see characters and lifestyles similar to their own, and windows to truly explore outside of their culture, ethnicity, or background. But now they can't build their collections. Many secondary librarians can now not afford the databases their students count on. Marshall, for example, was not able to purchase its career training database with library funds and instead had to rely on Title I funds, which should be spent on additional resources, not the basics. This is happening even though our district has affirmed its commitment to improvement on that campus and to using Title I funds for Title I services. In terms of physical safety, high school English classes were told students can't share books due to contamination concerns, and those books must be quarantined for at least 4 days. However, librarians were told not to quarantine their books due to TEA wording, even though recent scientific findings say COVID is detectable on books 6 days later if stacked, 3 days if laid flat. Campus librarians are being told they must serve
30
as
seconds
pseudo-learning
remaining.
while also providing in-person programming. How can they accommodate all the students? Well, their student per square foot calculations were done based on empty rooms. No furniture, no books, no laptop carts. So how many kids will be in these libraries? A trip to the library is like coming home and going on an adventure at the same time. Please help ensure our kids can continue enjoying the adventures that our libraries have to offer in a safe and equitable way. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking this evening, Mrs. Marino. We're going to now move along to our consent agenda. Agenda item 11A3 is being pulled from consideration. That being said, may I have a motion for our consent agenda?
Mr. Burdine, I also received word just a few minutes ago that we would also like to pull 11E43. pertaining to a detention pond at Hodges Bend Middle School.
Did you say 11E43, sir?
C, E4C.
Okay. All right, so agenda item 11A3 and 11E4C will be pulled from consideration this evening. May I have a motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve the consent agenda in its entirety as presented, with the exception of item 11A3 and item 11E4C.
May I have a second?
Second.
Who is the first one to give me a second?
This is
It's
Tossin.
Mrs. Tolsan. I'm sorry, it came all at once. So we have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mrs. Tolsan. Do we have any discussion?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay, Mrs. James,
Is it,
whenever you're ready.
I have a question on 11B1, which is the asynchronous learning attestation or resolution and learning plan. And my question is this something that, I have some confusion. Is this the plan for the whole year? And then we make amendments if we need to, or is this only for the first till the end of the third, 6th week reporting period?
Ms. James, this would be the asynchronous plan for the year for those students who are in the online environment. Once the board approves, we'll submit to TEA and they have an extensive review process. And even after TEA were to approve that, there's still an opportunity for us to amend the plan as we move forward in our planning and receive feedback and go through our continuous improvement efforts. So there is a mechanism for amending the plan, but it will take us through this school year where we will have the opportunity for students to be involved in the online environment.
Okay, and if the plan is to be amended, does it come back to the board, or are we giving authority for you all to amend the plan on your own?
The agenda as it stands does not give authority for us to amend the plan on our own. And since it is a board approved plan, I would see that we would bring that back to the board and inform you of the changes and the rationale for those changes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any other?
Follow up if that's okay.
Yes, ma'am, go for it.
So I just wanted to point out that we do have as part of our agenda this week, the resolution that is much like the resolution that we passed last board meeting. I guess that's a couple weeks ago now, related to providing asynchronous learning and following IEPs for our special education population. So I just wanted to point that out, that it is there, that it mirrors the resolution that we passed previously for our synchronous learning and those attestations, and that we are making similar statements here about our abilities to be able to do that, and our acknowledgement that these students will very likely need compensatory services. So I just wanted to point that out, that is included this week in our consent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Tolsan. Was there any other questions or comments?
I have a question on 11D2.
Go ahead, sir.
Is Fort Bend ISD reimbursed for these expenses?
Dr. Dupree, do we have someone to answer that?
Mr. Rosenthal, I do not have a document in front of me to know which item that is.
Oh,
Can you
I'm
please
sorry.
let me
So
know?
this is,
No, it's okay.
This is approval of a memorandum of understanding for the JJAEP program. So I believe, and I don't have to scroll down and I have to find it, but
Yes, no, absolutely. Joe can answer that one.
Yes, Mr. Rosenthal, we are. The agreement has that we have with other districts, they pay per seat. So if they utilize the seats, then we obviously are able to receive the funds. If they do not use the seats, then we do have to reimburse a portion back to that school district.
Right, I understand that, but so we sent, so let me pull it up here. I think we sent like, last year we sent like 60 kids or something like that. And I'm not necessarily asking about the seats that we hold for other districts. I'm just talking about for our students. So we spent, I don't know, I think it was like $400 and some thousand on this program last year. And so what I'm asking is, does the state reimburse us just like any other kid, any other student for the students that are in this program?
Okay, so I'm going to ask Brian Gwynn if he can assist with that question. My response would be an affirmative, but I'm going to have Brian Gwynn just verify that.
Yes, Joe, you are correct. That is correct.
Okay. So, and when you actually do the math on the per student basis, it actually comes out to what seems to be quite similar to what we are reimbursed or what we are basically paid for per student by the state anyway. So that's why I was kind of wondering about that. So, okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Do we have any other questions or comments from board members? We are working to get Mrs. Addie Helliger, but we lost her. And I know we're making an attempt to get her back online before we vote here. Mr. Rozier, do we have an update on that, or are we just waiting to get her back?
I have sent her a link again. I'm waiting for her to accept the link and come in.
All right. We'll give her just a few seconds here before we vote. Once again, thank you all for your patience this evening. If you just joined, the admin building is without power. Dr. Dupree is working under auxiliary power right now, and I know others are working under battery power. So we've moved a few things around on the agenda to ensure that we vote on our consent agenda and some of our action items. We will then do our COVID-19 update. Then we'll go into closed session and we'll come out and approve any closed session action items. Okay, Mrs. Helliger's having some issues right now, getting logged back on. I'm gonna go ahead and call for a vote, and hopefully she can join us here soon. I will now call roll so that each member can state his or her vote on this item. Mrs. Allison Drew, please state your name and vote yay or nay. Mrs. Allison Drew, whenever you're ready.
This is Allison Drew, and I vote yay.
Mrs. Grail James.
This is Grail James, and I vote yay.
Mr. Jim Rice.
This is Jim Rice. I vote yay.
Mr. Dave Rosenthal.
This is Dave Rosenthal. I vote yay.
Mrs. Kristen Tossan.
This is Kristen Tossan, and I vote yay.
This is Jason Burdine, and I also vote yay. We're now going to move along to our action item. May I have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Rudine, I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of 1.2402, which is effectively a 63%, no, a 0.63% increase in the tax rate. I further move that the 2020 total tax rate of 1.2402 be adopted with 0.9502 for maintenance and operations and 0.29 for debt service.
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Rice. We have a motion by Mrs. James and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, I will now call the roll so that each member can state his or her vote. Please state your name and vote yea or nay. Mrs. Allison Drew.
This is Allison Drew, and I vote yay.
Mrs. Grail James.
This is Grail James, and I vote yay.
Mr. Jim Rice.
This is Jim Rice, and I vote yay.
Mr. Dave Rosenthal.
This is Dave Rosenthal. I vote yay.
Mrs. Kristen Tolsan.
This is Kristen Tolsan, and I vote yay.
This is Jason Birding, and I also vote yay. Do we have Mrs. Hilliger on just yet? I don't see her on here.
No, sir, we're still having difficulties.
All right, motion passes. Moving along to 12A2. May I have a motion?
Mr. Burdine, I don't see a 12A2 on my agenda, but is there one?
To consider approval of suspending certain components of board policy FMG local regarding student transportation.
I don't know anything about it.
I move to approve item 12A2 as presented.
We have a motion by Mrs. Tolsan. Do we have a second?
This is Jim Rice. I second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Tolsan and a second by Mr. Rice. Dr. Dupree, can someone speak to this item, please, sir?
Hey, there's Addie. We got her back. Joe, can you speak to this item, please?
Yes, sir. Currently, policy allows parents to transport their child after an event, but policy does dictate that to an event, district transportation must be used. Considering the current situation that we're in, we are asking to go ahead and allow parents the opportunity to transport their children to and from the events as they deem appropriate.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any discussion? Mrs. James, did you have a question?
No, I guess I have an old agenda because I don't have that item on my list, so I'll probably be abstaining from this.
All right, Mrs. Tolsan, did I see you raise your hand?
Yes, I just want to confirm that we are suspending this item, this policy only for the duration of the 2021 school year.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments about this item? All right. I will now call the roll so that each member can state his or her vote on this item. Please state your name and vote yea or nay. Mrs. Allison Drew.
This is Allison Drew, and I vote yay.
Mrs. Addie Helliger.
I can't vote on this matter because I was kicked off the Zoom and I did not hear the discussion, so I abstain.
All right. Mrs. Grail James.
This is Grail James. I abstain also.
Mr. Jim Rice.
This is Jim Rice. I vote yay.
Mr. Dave Rosenthal.
Based on the answers that we just received, I will vote yay.
Mrs. Kristen Tolsan.
This is Kristen Tolsan, and I vote yay.
This is Jason Burdine, and I also vote yay. This motion passes. Dr. Dupree, can we please get information to Mrs. Helliger and Mrs. James about this item?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, Mrs. James, it was not on your agenda.
We did an update to the agenda on Friday afternoon.
Yeah, I think well, somehow I thought I got it after that, but I must have missed it. So it's partially my fault. Thank you. If you can send me the information, I'd appreciate it.
Happy to do that.
Thank you, Mrs. James, and thank you, Dr. Dupree. Let's now move along to our information item, our COVID-19 update, Dr. Dupree.
Yes, sir. We have got a brief presentation this evening. I'm going to do an overview, but really we've got staff, and I'm just going to tell you I'm down to about 5% battery power on my laptop, so I may switch to my phone in just a second. But bottom line is what we wanted to do this evening is, since the board approved the timeline at the last meeting, and staff has been publicly sharing the plan for implementation designed by staff, we just wanted to do a logistical update to keep the board informed of where we are. So there's just a handful of slides this evening about how we're deploying teachers and the timeline for opening school for the dual programming. But I did want to address a couple of things myself before staff takes over the actual presentation. The things I wanted to address, first of all, I wanted to speak to some of the comments that were made earlier about the fine arts mitigation plan and the guidelines. And I want to thank the community for their engagement and the feedback they provided on that. As I've shared with several community members today and some board members who've asked me about this, I think we did demonstrate a misalignment between some of our departments, athletics and fine arts, and we do want to openly acknowledge that and express the regrets and apologies that it created stress for our students, the staff who support those programs, as well as some of the parents, because we do know that these programs are equally important, and we support our fine arts students just as we support our athletes. And I think everybody knows that about this board and superintendent. But we did have a situation that we're in the process of rectifying. We're still scrubbing those documents, but overall we are trying to stay tightly aligned with UIL guidelines and to protect our students. So you can expect to see that there were a number of changes made today, and there will be more changes. But and just to be fair to all involved, I will say we do have a lot of people moving very quickly. So it's regrettable that we did not make some of those connections, and that we did have kind of a silo operation in some of our areas. But we are fixing that, and I think we're in a good place moving forward. So I appreciate those who have indicated support for that. I also want to address some of what we're dealing with in regard to the big picture right now. As you will see, we are using our staff in very unique ways in terms of we're going to be leveraging all staff to optimize the learning experience for all of our students. This means we're going to be doing cross-campus use of staff. We'll be doing distance learning. And a lot of teachers and community members have asked about how we're doing that, why we're doing that, and why the class sizes are what they are. But I'm going to consistently remind our community, as I did all of our teachers who participated in 2 webinars for teachers today, that we are running a dual system that we've never had to run before. And we're doing it with the same staff that we currently have for our regular face-to-face system. And the piece that really occurred to me that's been missing as part of this conversation that I wanted to bring the board into the loop and our community tonight is the idea that we are operating under significant pressure from the state financially right now. Right now, our enrollment in Fort Bend ISD is down by about 3,000 students. We spoke about this last week in the boardroom as part of our budget workshop. In a meeting on Friday with the commissioner and superintendents from across the state, this is a statewide trend when we anticipated we would all be under enrolled this year, and that is coming to fruition despite all of our efforts to find these students who were previously enrolled in our district. Right now, the commissioner is planning to fund us on a hold harmless on an average of last year's enrollment for the first 12 weeks of school. But we have consistently asked him to extend that hold harmless throughout the entire school year, because he does have the authority and the allocated funds from the legislature to do that if he is willing to do it. So we're compelling him and other elected officials to support full funding of schools, because the situation it creates right now is that we have been unable to give our teachers a raise. And our reality is if they do not hold us harmless for the full year, we are projected a revenue shortfall of about $18 million. So when I talked to my teachers today, I explained to them that we know that the load is on their shoulders, and we are not able to go hire more teachers, even if they're available, with the possibility that we may be facing a revenue shortfall. So I want to make that very clear to our community and the board that we are working in a very constrained environment to run a system we're not intended to run. And our teachers are doing a remarkable job carrying an exceptionally heavy load to make that happen. And this administration, as the board so often joins me in saying they are carrying a load and we're going to support them every step of the way. We are going to manage their number of preps. We're going to manage their load, their student load, and we're going to continuously work with them to take things off their plate, as we did recently with professional development, to help them feel the bandwidth and the space they need to do their job well, even under these very challenging circumstances. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of our board and the community who may be listening, because I know there are many concerns about class size and the student experience, but I feel confident that our teachers are ready to do the job. They're assuring me that they are, but they also keep letting me know it is a very heavy lift, and they're carrying a great deal of personal stress and strain over this, and we're going to continue to support them in every way. So with that, I do want to go ahead and let Deanna Saavedra, our deputy, move into the report that we have prepared for the board, as with what I've shared as kind of the background for this presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Dupree, and good evening, President Verdeen and members of the board. As Dr. Dupree indicated, this evening we'll be sharing additional details about our transition to our dual instruction models. Assisting me this evening with the presentation will be Melissa Hubbard, our Teaching and Learning Executive Director, and Stephanie Williams, our Executive Director of Organizational Transformation. We'll begin with system development as it relates. Gary, can you move to the next slide, please? Thanks. We'll begin with system development as it relates to master schedule design, cross-entity assignments, and business continuity. We'll transition to implementation, which includes asynchronous instruction and required professional development to ensure a seamless transition, followed by outlining strategies to mitigate academic dishonesty, and finally, quality assurance measures associated with health and safety protocols. Next slide, please, Gary. So as Dr. Dupree indicated, the board approved the timeline that's posted before you in last week's board meeting. The timeline illustrates 3 phases of the transition to the dual learning models, which include data collection, which you see in green, system development in red, and implementation in blue. Go ahead to the next slide, please. Thank you. So part of our system development, and I would say the linchpin of our system development, is wrapped up in master schedule design. There's a number, there's a lot of tedious work and a lot of details associated with master schedule design. But as we've developed this particular system, we've kept equitable access and high quality instruction at the forefront. As part of the master schedule design, there are many things that go into that, beginning with the learning model selection. That was part of the data collection process, but once students determined what model they were going to be part of, then that began the development of the master schedule. In addition to that, we had to consider course selection requests. Along with that, teacher requests for accommodations and the availability of staff. Obviously, we need to make sure that every child that is receiving instruction, regardless of modality, has a teacher who's certified to do so. And then, as you'll understand as we move through the presentation, there's much hand scheduling that's also involved in the design of our master schedule. Next slide, please. So as Dr. Dupree indicated, a big piece of the system development and the master schedule design includes cross-entity staffing and temporary teacher assignments. Our goal in doing this is to make sure that we effectively and efficiently use all staff, anticipating possible budget shortfalls. And again, our goal being equity and high quality instruction for all students. As we think about cross-entity staffing, there's 3 possible ways that we've done this. The first being face-to-face, which includes teacher moves between different physical campuses by day. For example, a teacher may be assigned to 2 campuses. On Monday, they would report to possibly their home campus, and then on Tuesday, they would report to the partner campus to deliver instruction. But they would not have to be traveling between campuses on the same day. Online, which includes teachers who may have students from different campuses, but they're combined in the same online classroom. Distance learning, which is something that we've engaged in for a number of years in Fort Bend, primarily for some of our language courses, our foreign language courses, but that includes face-to-face students receiving instruction in a classroom at their home campus from a teacher who may be located on another campus, which is why it's called distance learning. I want to emphasize that any assignments where teachers may be relocated are temporary assignments. So when we think about those, some teachers, as I mentioned, may be temporarily deployed to a different campus. They may be asked to take on another role based on their certification. Again, this would be temporarily, they would take on this role temporarily. And then the third being another campus or another role in which a teacher might be deployed temporarily to another campus and then take on another role based on their certification. Next slide, please. You've seen this slide before, and I want to emphasize that as we look at our system to gradually phase students in over time, beginning with our teachers returning this Wednesday on September the 23rd, followed by our phased in pre-K and kinder, first grade, and all other grade levels as we move through, with our goal being that all students will be transitioned back by October the 12th. As we've developed this system, we've also included transition supports that are critical for our teachers. As you'll note, I'll hand it off to Melissa Hubbard in just a few minutes. She'll explain specifically the asynchronous learning plan, because during this transition, we'll need 3 days of asynchronous learning. There's also a number of technology transitions for this crossover that are going to have to be done. And so again, we've incorporated that in our system. We also want to make sure that there's adequate time for teachers to create their workspace and their classroom setup. And then obviously, this system includes and emphasizes the ability for us to acclimate students to new support, to new routines, and support them in this transition, along with building relationships. So at this time, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Melissa Hubbard, who'll share some of the specific implementation measures. Melissa?
Thank you, Ms. Saavedra. Gary, if I could have the next slide, please. So kind of connecting back to what Ms. Saavedra just talked about with that transitioning back into the learning environment and launching dual models, we know that there are some business continuity considerations so that we can have a smooth implementation. And part of that involves very specific and intentional actions that will take place on the part of the principal as well as the teachers in order to make sure that there's limited disruption, because our goal ultimately is that we do not have a gap in that student learning and that instructional delivery continues as we transition to dual models. So what you'll see here is an example of a communication tool that has been provided to principals that kind of walks them through the big picture, all of the little pieces and nuances that need to happen between us launching and planning and those intentional actions to when the kids come back. And so we have developed some communication tools such as these for parents, for principals and teachers, so that they have a picture of what it will look like for their students as well as for themselves as we transition to dual models. One of the things that we will focus in on with principals and teachers are these intentional actions, because there may be some disruption to technology when we think about the hand scheduling of all of those students into Skyward, and then the technology syncing that has to occur between Skyward and some of our technology tools such as Schoology and Teams. So this communication provided to principals and teachers also gives them expectations of things to do to limit that disruption. Next slide, please, Gary. So what you will notice here as part of the implementation is the launch of new schedules. So we know that with all of that hand scheduling that there may be some adjustments to student schedules. So what you'll notice here is that for elementary, we will be conducting Meet the Teachers that will begin this week. If you follow that phased in implementation of students coming back, we'll have those Meet the Teachers coordinated with students coming back face to face so that they can re-engage with the teacher and parents can meet and families can meet that teacher. And schedules will begin to be available for elementary students beginning on September the 25th. What you'll notice with elementary is that the students will start their new schedule in tandem with the day that the face-to-face students will begin reporting to school. In the secondary model, the students will begin to see their schedules on October the 2nd as those master schedules finalize at the secondary level. But this will be a little bit different in the sense that students at the secondary will all begin following their new schedule October the 5th, but we will adhere to the phased in face-to-face schedule as students begin to come into the buildings according to our staggered schedule that we just looked at. Gary, on the next slide. In order to support the teacher readiness to bring kids back into the building, we have brought in, we have 3 days of asynchronous learning for students, September 23rd through to the 25th. Students will engage in asynchronous learning for those 3 days to continue moving through the curriculum, as well as teachers being able to measure their progress as they move through those 3 days of learning. Teachers have been provided supports through some specific videos that help them to understand what that asynchronous learning could look like, as well as supports that have been put into the curriculum to help them plan that asynchronous learning. Daily attendance will be taken for students during this 3-day time period, and progress will be monitored for teachers. In just a moment, Ms. Williams is going to go through some professional learning, and it will be linked back to this content as well, and what the teachers will be learning about. And lastly, I wanted to address, Gary, on the next slide, our special education and dyslexia teachers. As you know, we do currently have some students that are engaging in face-to-face learning on our campuses. So students that are receiving special education services that are currently in a face-to-face instructional environment will remain in that face-to-face environment on those 3 days and will not move to asynchronous instruction. Some considerations have been made for those teachers that are on site to determine the appropriate support that they might need for transitioning to the face-to-face model and welcoming additional students. So what you'll see on this slide is some different instances in which a special education teacher might require additional planning time. And so what are the supports that are put in place for that teacher in order to continue with the face-to-face instruction if that's necessary, and also create space for that teacher to welcome additional students if necessary. So I'm going to pass the presentation on to Ms. Williams, who is going to spend a few moments going through the components of the professional learning as it relates to supporting our teachers.
Thank you, Melissa. Gary, could you go to the next slide, please? As many of you know, we've been working to engage teachers throughout our planning and feedback using traditional models like teacher leader meetings or the Let's Talk platform. We've also rolled out focus groups and our Thought Exchange crowdsourced platform. Over the past couple of weeks, looking at feedback from all of those platforms, one theme came to light, and that theme was around our required professional learning. So as you may know, our required professional learning this year is an evidence of practice model, which makes it job embedded. It requires teachers to go about learning and practicing with their students and providing evidence of their practice around authentic assessment. The theme that we learned about this particular professional learning is that it is absolutely the right model in order to grow our teachers, our most valuable resource. It is also the right content. Authentic assessment is something that could be studied throughout one's career and improved upon each year. The trouble is, it's the wrong time. During a pandemic with the transitions that we're asking our teachers to make, we're sitting on the wrong time to launch a new model. So as Dr. Dupree shared, we announced last week and continuing this week in teacher webinars that we are postponing this model immediately. Teachers will be credited for their work in modules that'll be documented before we restart so that they'll get credit for everything that they've done. We're doing this to relieve a little bit of the time constraints that teachers have and to really focus on a seamless transition, that transition that we'll be making to learning models and even some of the pivots that the pandemic may require throughout the year. On the next slide, you'll see required learning that is needed in order to transition this first time. This required learning goes about 2 courses. The first one is called a roadmap to transitioning with technology. Last week, Ms. James asked about hurdles that might get in our way as we walk through the timeline that was approved. One of those hurdles could be our technology if our teachers are not prepared for what Melissa called syncing technology. When we change our master schedules, it does take time for technology systems to speak to each other and for students to have the rights to everything that they need. This course outlines for teachers how they can preserve student grades and how they can ensure that students receive access to the learning experiences. That's part 1 of this course. In the second part of this course, we are addressing feedback from students, parents, and teachers related to the Schoology course structure. I don't think I've been in a feedback session or a focus group this year or spoken to a parent or student that hasn't mentioned the folder structure in Schoology. We've been working with teachers, we've been working with leaders, and we've been working at the central office level to address the Schoology folder structure. In a recent focus group, we had several members of elementary and secondary teachers who expressed success with some of the things that they were doing in their own classroom. In this course, those teachers, the peers, will be sharing with other teachers best practices around how they've organized their courses, what's worked for our younger students, and what works for our older students. So in this course, teachers will receive the information they need to make a smooth transition and ensure all technology systems are accessible to both them and students, along with hearing about best practices related to the use of Schoology with students of all levels. And that course takes about an hour of learning through start to end and participation in everything. They'll be able to do that during their asynchronous time this week. The second course that all teachers will take is about half an hour, and it ties to preparing for a socially distanced instruction. It's a reminder for our teachers around our health and safety protocols, along with suggestions in how they might engage students and how we might build a community that supports each other's health and wellness. These two required transition courses take up about an hour and a half of teachers' time, and they will support only the seamless transition. This time I'm going to pass back to Deanna, and she'll be sharing with you some of our next steps related to academic dishonesty. Gary, can you move on to the next slide? Thank you. So there's been a lot of discussion about academic dishonesty, and to be honest, it's an issue that schools face regardless of what the learning modality might be. But I want to say very clearly that Fort Bend ISD is taking this very seriously. I'd like to talk to you this evening about several things that we're doing and strategies that we will employ to mitigate academic dishonesty. As you know, we've come into the boardroom to discuss on a number of occasions the rollout of our curriculum and our focus on assessment practices and authentic assessment. And so a long-term measure that we use and will continue to use and will be extremely helpful for us, especially in our online environment, is really emphasizing authentic assessment and assessment design. You've heard us talk a lot about products, performances, and processes. And so we're going to be looking very carefully and working with teachers and supporting teachers on that continued assessment design. And our hope and our expectation is that just as we've learned quickly how to pivot and transition in an online environment, that it will also accelerate some of the assessment practices that teachers have used as a default in terms of multiple choice, that will begin to explore and accelerate the use of other creative ways to assess students. I also want to emphasize the fact that we've purchased Respondus lockdown browser. This does isolate the internet browsers while students are taking an assessment, and this is something that we'll continue to use. We're also analyzing additional features for online assessment proctoring with our current system, and we're also reaching out to other school districts and researching on some of the tools that they're using in the higher education environment so that we can continue to refine and incorporate strategies, again, to mitigate academic dishonesty. But something that you've heard, especially emphasized by Ms. Williams, is the fact that our teachers are a critical part of the decision-making process. They're on the front lines, and in many cases, our teachers are finding and implementing very effective strategies in terms of monitoring both in the online platform and what they've done for years in the face-to-face platform to mitigate academic dishonesty. So we'll be working with our teachers and discovering what are the best practices that they've been incorporating over the last 9 weeks with our students. And we're also continue to engage with other school districts to find out what they're doing. And our goal is that we will be publishing specific guidelines by October the 5th, when especially our secondary students will start coming back and phased into the face-to-face environment. So we will be publishing guidelines and specific information. And what I would also share is that over time, as we continue to run our two platforms, we're going to learn along the way, and we're going to continue to refine and improve our processes, because as I said, our goal is to mitigate as much as possible, academic dishonesty. Although we may never completely eliminate cheating, I hate to use that word, we will institute as many systems and processes and strategies that will serve to successfully contain that issue. Next slide, please, Gary. And lastly, I'd like to talk a little bit about health and safety protocols. It's something that's very sensitive, not only to our parents, but also to our students and our staff that's working in the face-to-face environment. So as we think about transitioning our students back and really emphasizing to our staff that we take their health and safety very, very seriously. We're going to be looking at a number of different communication methods, along with some quality assurance methods, to institutionalize some of the new behaviors, routines, and practices that'll become part of this new environment that we're in. So first of all, leader messaging is critical, and communicating expectations about implementing and adhering to our health and safety protocols with fidelity is a non-negotiable. We'll also be working to communicate several public service announcements, because we know that simply publishing the protocols, training people on the protocols, and communicating expectations is not enough. We have to have ongoing reinforcement through, you know, as I said, public service announcements, so that we begin to institutionalize these practices that are going to become a part of our new normal and very important to our health and safety measures. In addition to that, we're instituting some quality assurance measures. We've worked very closely, the HR department, Human Resources Department, and the Department of School Leadership, along with the SEL and Comprehensive Health Department, have worked in collaboration to develop a checklist and a walkthrough tool that we can use to support campuses and providing them feedback on any gaps that they may have in their health and safety protocols. So doing walkthroughs, daily, ongoing, and monitoring, and a level of accountability and a reporting structure, so that if teachers find, parents find, or as principals are walking through their building, that there are ways that people can report when they note that a safety protocol or wearing a mask or things of that nature have been violated. So again, we feel very strongly that these additional measures need to be part of our system and our process, because it is important for us to institutionalize these new behaviors and these new protocols, because they will become part of our new day-to-day routine. And that really concludes our presentation. We'll take questions at this time.
Thank you very much for the presentation this evening. We do have a few questions and comments from board members. First is going to be Mrs. Kristen Tausan, and then Mrs. Grail James, and then Mr. Jim Rice, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. I appreciate it. And thanks, Dr. Dupree and Deanna and Stephanie and Melissa and everyone for the presentation this evening and for giving us some updates. I know we've had a lot of community members and staff members wondering how a lot of this was going to go. And so thanks for making this presentation tonight. I'm going to work backwards with a couple questions that I have. And I'm going to start with the academic dishonesty slide. And you say we've purchased the Respondus lockdown browser. And so my question is around that. When are we going to be implementing that? Do we have a timeline for that?
Melissa, can you respond to that, please? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So at this time, the Respondus lockdown browser is active, and teachers are able to use it at this time.
Okay, so implementation is immediate, and I assume, are we requiring all teachers to use it? Is that something that is left to their discretion? How are we doing that?
That is something that's required. And as I said, when we publish the guidelines on October the 5th, we will make that clear.
Okay, so I assume that this is something that only works when tests are given during class time, and it can't be used outside of class time, correct?
It can be used outside of class time. It's embedded within Schoology, so the assessment would have to be inside of Schoology. And the teacher sets it up as a feature when they design the test.
Okay, so if teachers are giving tests that let's say, open at noon and close at midnight, they can set this up or embed it within the test, and it can be used to determine or to help prevent cheating regardless of when that test is being taken.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, thank you. My next question is about, I just want to confirm that when we go to slide 8 and we were talking about the system development and the phase in for secondary students, we're going to start the new schedule on October 5th, but phase in over the week. So I assume starting would mean they start online for those who are not face-to-face.
That is correct.
Okay, so I just wanted to confirm that. So my last set of questions are really around some of the things that Dr. Dupree talked about in the beginning, and the kind of the fine arts and other guidelines that are going out. So Dr. Dupree, I want to say, I don't know if he's still with us. I hope he is. I want to say thank you for making those statements at the outset. I had some concerns mostly around equity and consistency and alignment, and making sure that all of the information and guidelines coming out from our departments are consistent. And so, like, one of the questions that kind of popped into my mind, Deanna, as you were going over slide 1 and the master schedule design, you have equitable access there in big letters. And so the first question that came to me was, so what do we mean by that? I mean, when we say equitable access, what are we talking about? And so I'd like for somebody to define that for me.
Well, sorry, I'm sorry about that. When we talk about equitable access, really in this context, we're looking at, as we're standing up 2 dual learning systems, we want to make sure that all of our students have access to the curriculum, regardless of what learning modality they may be in, whether it's a face-to-face or virtual platform. And so that's really what we mean by equitable access. As we stand up both of these systems, our system is developed in such a way that our students, that there's equity in the learning environment, in the delivery of instruction, and that all of our students receive high quality instruction.
Okay, thank you for that, because that's what I think of too when I hear equitable access or equity in the curriculum. And so I just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page. And so with that, somebody has their mic on.
Okay. Sorry, Mrs. Tossian, I'm trying to look to see who that is. Go ahead. We're sorry about that.
So what I want to say around that is that as we're ensuring that we have equity in our curriculum and equity in our delivery and in our learning, I think we need to make sure that when we're developing guidelines across all of our programs, that we ensure that we have consistency and equity in those guidelines. And so I listened to our speakers this evening as well, and having someone in fine arts as I do, and I know other board members do as well, I just want to make sure that we are not being more restrictive than we need to be, not being more restrictive than some of the guidelines that are out there from UIL and some of the state guidelines. And I want to make sure, most importantly, that Fort Bend ISD is being consistent, and that Fort Bend ISD is ensuring that we have equity. So with that being said, I'm not going to go through some of my specific questions about the guidelines that are being put out there, but I just wanted to say that, and that I look forward to seeing how we're going to ensure that, and maybe get some updated guidelines. One overarching question I do have, Dr. Dupree, is, do we have district-wide guidelines or guidance that we've put out in order to create consistency among our programs and from our departments.
So I'm going to hope you can hear me without a bunch of distracting background noise because I'm in the server room right now. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir, you're
Good.
fine.
Thank you. So yes, that has been our goal, but I am going to tell you, Mrs. Tassan, especially in light of the conversations I've had today with staff, we're going to go back and lay side by side our athletics, our fine arts, all the various programming to make sure that they're aligned with UIL, that they are, and that we have parity and consistency across the district. As I mentioned earlier, one of the issues we have faced is a lot of people working very quickly to serve the needs. And I think now we need to take just a few minutes and go back and lay all of this out very clearly so it's all tightly aligned. But our goal, as Deanna mentioned, and as we've talked about really since the beginning of the pandemic, is that we have equity in every way so that every student in every school has similar access, and that, and even programmatic access like fine arts, athletics, world languages, whatever you think of. We want our kids to have the full experience to the best of our ability under these circumstances.
So thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I certainly appreciate how quickly everyone has had to get things up and running and out the door and drafting things as we reimagine what school's going to look like. So I absolutely appreciate that. And I do think taking a step back to ensure that we are being consistent is great, because I can see issues arising in a CTE perspective and even in, some other areas of programming, and really even inconsistencies within fine arts or within athletics or within, because I know that I've at least gotten some community feedback that there have been differences among the different sports and how things are being handled. So I think it's going to be important that we sort of ensure that we have some consistency on what we're following, what our spacing is going to be, when we're going to require masks and when we aren't, what contact is allowed and what contact isn't. So I appreciate you and your team maybe taking a step back, taking another look at that, and making sure that we're consistent going forward.
Ms. Tassan, if you don't mind, I would inject two more pieces to that. One of the things that and again, because I do want to extend as much grace to all of our staff as possible, because one of the things, even in reviewing the fine arts documents today, there have been changes from the UIL perspective, even in the last few weeks. So things are changing. So we're just going to have to get in the routines of updating that. But the other thing that I think what we're seeing, which is very real, is the perspective of the actual teacher of a program or the coach of a sport or a program. Their own personal viewpoints are coming to bear in how they run their program. So we are doing our best to mitigate for that, to set clear expectations about student experience. But there is always going to be a degree of, I think, just uniqueness based on the conductor, the teacher, the instructor, the coach, and some of how they come to the table as well. But again, we're working to have uniform guidelines and asking them to enforce them in a uniform way.
Right, and I think that's important, because I think that's why I asked for the definition of equitable access, because I don't want, and I don't think you want, or any of our staff want, one student to have an experience or be able to experience their classes in a way where students at another school are not able to gain that same or similar experience. So I appreciate that statement as well. And I think, I think we all know that we are probably going to have this fast-paced, fast-moving changes probably for the foreseeable future, at least through the rest of this school year. And so I guess the other thing I would ask is to, as you visit this, to make sure that we do have those district level guidelines and the if-thens maybe spelled out. Is perhaps we are constantly looking, or consistently on a weekly or every 2-week basis, looking at those UIL guidelines, looking at those state guidelines, just to ensure that we're changing as they're changing, because I know that this is probably going to be the way things are for the foreseeable future. And in order for us to stay on top of it as a district, we probably are going to need some protocols in place for making sure that we're continuously updating as things change moving forward. Certainly if hopefully a vaccine comes out, and then that may change things again as people start receiving the vaccine. So anyway, I think that level of consistency at the district level is probably going to help as all of these departments struggle with a lot of these guidelines and recommendations. So thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mrs. Tossan. Mrs. James, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Burdine, and thank you, Mrs. Tossan, for your comments. And I'm just going to pick up on a few things that you said. And Dr. Dupree, I hope you're not too cold there in the server room, because I understand we have a pretty robust AC system in there. Okay, so what your conversation that you just were having brought to mind, and when I see high quality instruction and I see equitable access, I think about our policy about managed curriculum. And I think about how we have that policy in place so that the experiences that our students have are equitable across the district. So they have equitable access to the curriculum, but then they have an equitable experience through it. And I think really that's what we're talking about here. So I appreciate all of you talking about how we're going to review these guidelines and make sure that it is an equitable experience, that we're going to align the guidelines, and that we're going to think about our special programs that have to, that may have some specialty circumstances, I guess, that aren't a traditional, whatever that looks like, a regular classroom in the sense of a number of students per square footage, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess I think you've answered that. I do want to ask or just mention one other thing with regard to CDC guidelines. Mrs. Tossan brought up state and local and UIL. But I noticed that there have been an update to the CDC guidelines recently about mask wearing and the impact of just actual breathing on the spread of the virus. And so I just wanted to note that and make sure that folks on staff have taken note of that. The other thing I want to pick up on, and I think Dr. Dupree mentioned this, and I think others of you did too in your presentation, is the tremendous lift we're asking from our staff in terms of these changes. We're asking for them to be maybe at multiple campuses, to maybe be teaching content that they haven't taught in a while. All of those things at this point are really just adding to the stress of yet a new something, whatever this next phase is going to be. And I know you guys are working really, really hard to define that. And I really can tell from the slides and the level of detail that you're really working hard. And I know Dr. Dupree spent some time today in communication. And I just want to thank you for that effort, and I guess say that I think there's still some compassion and kindness and in communication that needs to take place to help people to get through these changes. And I think our organization will be a lot more effective if we see it that way, and versus why aren't you getting it kind of an attitude. And so, because I do think there's tremendous amount of change happening. The next thing I wanted to bring up is again, or comment on, is some of the things that Dr. Dupree was talking about earlier in terms of this dual system of instruction that we're embarking upon. And I heard you guys talking, I guess, in the presentation about health and safety protocols. And I want to just, I appreciated the affirmation of all of those and what you're doing around communication, what you're doing around quality assurance. Because I think the parents are really counting on those protocols. They made decisions around those protocols. And I think it's really important that we that we recognize that and we kind of work them into our norms. So I really appreciated that. And I will say too, that as we are entering into this dual system, it's really quite amazing. We are pivoting, we are reimagining our school system. We've done it in 6 months' time. We're launching a dual system in a week's time. And you guys are talking about high quality instruction and equitable access. And I don't doubt that we'll be able to do that because that's who we are and that's what we do. And so when I was thinking about it earlier today, I was thinking about how much we've expanded our model, how much we've expanded our services really to provide this dual system. We've got online, we've got face-to-face, we've got some hybrids in there for some specialty classes and special needs. And it's really, really remarkable because anything else we've done like this in the last 8.5 years I've been on the school board, we've studied it, we've thought about it for a long time, we've ramped it up, we've piloted it, we've done a soft start, and we've just eased our way into it. And this is a whole new situation where we are creating something and we're going to transition to it. And it's going to be great, but we're doing it in a whole new way. So I just wanted to bring that up because all of these changes, not only in the way we deliver instruction, but in the environment we're delivering it in. And even if it is a face-to-face model, it's nothing like face-to-face was back in January and February. And I want to recognize that because it's really remarkable for an organization this size to go from what we were doing in 6 months to something to do a dual system completely new in a new way. And I just wanted to reiterate that because we need every single staff member to be part of that team to pull this off. And we need all of our, we've got a lot of great people working on this and we need everybody to join the band because, no pun intended, sorry about that, because we really need everybody to join the team and be part of it. And then I think we can do it and we can accomplish it. And I'm very proud of all the work we've done. I'm proud of the thoughtfulness that and the time that we've taken to do this. I know we've had some heated discussions, some tough meetings, perhaps even expressing frustration from time to time in the boardroom. But if you think in the aggregate of what we've done, it really is remarkable. And I don't doubt that going forward, there's going to be mistakes or there's going to be things we wish we could have done better or we would have noticed sooner. And I'm not saying me because that's not up to me. That's obviously up to all the staff. But I do think we can be very proud of what we've accomplished and what we're going to implement. And I just want to encourage everybody with that. I have one last thing I want to bring up, and that is this, as we're reimagining Fort Bend ISD, I'm concerned a little bit about, Dr. Dupree, you brought up the financial shortfall. I know you talked about that a little bit last week, but I just want to express that I'm concerned about that. And I'm concerned that about what that's going to look like going forward. And is this something, the hold harmless provision, is it something that needs to be changed in the next 4 to 6 weeks? Is this something that can be retroactively changed? What is the outlook on that, and how do we advocate for what needs to happen?
So I appreciate your asking that. There's a couple of things I would say, Mrs. James, in response. I'll answer your question, but I would also like to make a couple of remarks. So in direct response to your question, currently the hold harmless is scheduled to end at the end of 12 weeks. So yes, it is something they need to act on. I'm sure they could always do it retroactively, but we would prefer having the knowledge that we're going to be taken care of rather than having to wonder what's going to happen. That uncertainty is not healthy for the organization on any level. And so the ask that we're at, this is in the commissioner's hands at this point. He has the authority to fund, and he has the funds are allocated through the legislature to fund it. So it's a matter of him agreeing to do it. So for me, what advocacy looks like is continuing to appeal to him to make that change, but to also write the governor, who is his boss, the lieutenant governor, and other leaders in our state legislature to compel them to work with the commissioner to make this happen. That's the approach we believe we need to take. And since we are discussing this, I want to be very clear because I did talk to two teachers, thousands of teachers today about this very issue. And I did let them know, because I know Fort Bend ISD went through some very rough waters 9 or 10 years ago during some budget cuts, and that people are very concerned. Anytime budget reduction in our district is mentioned, they're very worried about the impact on teachers. So I did tell them that the board's adopted a budgetary strategy and fiscal policy addresses how to handle these things, and that everything we do in our district is very strategic, and that as superintendent, I will not be recommending to the board riffing teachers. That we have fund balances, we have strategies, we have many things we can do to navigate this year, because we adopted a conservative budget, and then the board knew about that going into this year, what the risks were. So I assured staff repeatedly, and I will continue to do so, that this is not a time, this is a perfect storm where many districts in this state are talking about the possibility of laying off staff while they are running dual systems. And I've told our teachers that we will not be having that conversation in Fort Bend. Because we can't shift more weight on the teachers who would remain. So we can't go find and hire a bunch of new teachers right now, but nor will we make recommendations to the board that would impact the current teachers we have in any more negative way than they're currently being impacted under the circumstance. So I just want to be able to clarify that while we're talking about this subject.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for commenting and about the how we can advocate, and thank you for mentioning about the value that the teachers have to this. And I'll just close with this remark, which relates to that, and that is, if we weren't a public entity and we were a business and we were expanding our services or expanding our product line or expanding our store, if you will, we wouldn't be reducing our staff, we would be increasing our staff in order to help us through that transition. And so I just would like to say to the governor, to the lieutenant governor, to the commissioner, we are expanding our services. Fort Bend ISD is expanding services. We are meeting the needs of every child, and this is not a time to reduce funding. This is not a time to hold us in financial limbo. This is a time to support us, to support the work we're doing, and to hold us harmless toward providing the excellent education services that we do provide here in Fort Bend ISD. So thank you for giving me the opportunity, and I yield the floor to my colleagues.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Next is Mr. Jim Rice.
Thank you, President Burdine. I hope that Dr. Dupree, you and Diana Saavedra and Ms. Williams and whoever else is in the admin building has a flashlight to help you get out. It's looking pretty dark in there. I'm serious about that. Okay, do you have a way out?
Yes, sir, we do. And there's some staff here that are supporting us.
All right. Well, I'm going to comment on what you talked about earlier, and I appreciate my colleagues' comments. The comment about 2,900 students. So here's a question. In the last semester, how many students, I know we worked very hard to reach out to all of our students, but we were unable to reach out to 100% of our students. Do you recall how many students we were unable to reach? Because it was about the same amount, was it not?
Joe, do you recall off the top of your head how many students we were unable to reach in the spring?
Dr. Dupree, off the top of my head, it sounds like Mr. Rice is correct, but just to be for certain, I would have to get that information and share that with him tomorrow.
I think it was about 2,200. My memory could be faulty, but and I know, what are we doing to try to reach out to these current 2,900 students?
Mr. Rice, so we have multiple layers. We have campus personnel that is reaching out to these individuals. We have the office or the Department of Student Affairs that's also making contact. We're using the resource that we have with Saved by the Bell. We have some personnel from Saved by the Bell that are also assisting along with our own attendance specialists. So we have multiple departments that are making the necessary contact. We also have CASA as well. So we have a contract with CASA, and CASA is also providing the support to ensure that we're reaching out to these families that are still in Fort Bend ISD. So from the campus level, from the district level, our partners at the county, and of course with CASA as well, we're just using every type of resource that we have at our disposal to make contact with these families.
Mr. Rice, I would add to that by saying that one of the dynamics we're facing, and this is, again, this is happening across the state, is there are students who have simply disappeared. That even we're doing everything in our, as Joe mentioned, to find them, but there are students that are, when you go to the house, they're not there, they're not responding to emails or phone calls, and we're not sure where these students have gone related. And we believe the pandemic has had an impact, that maybe they have left the state or left the country due to the circumstances. But, you know, we can typically track students who have gone to charters, privates, or other districts, but there's just a void in the state with thousands and thousands of students that are just not accounted for right now.
Well, that is troubling. The $18 million, I will wager that to put that in perspective, that potential loss is probably more than our annual electric bill. So if we turned off the lights and the air conditioning in every facility, which they're already turned off in your building, but for a full year, it wouldn't make up, it wouldn't yield the delta. So we've got to put the full court press on the commissioner, number one. Number two, House Bill 3, which was passed, we knew going into this year that we thought we were going to be okay, because House Bill 3 funded our budget for 2 years. Next year's a different story. And next year, the state is not going to have as much money as they did when they passed House Bill 3. And if they don't have the money, they may not be able to fund us, and we may have to seek alternative measures to generate revenue. I lost my train of thought. So it's really critical that if we have 77,000 students, that represents about 3% of the total student population Is that right? We're about 77,000. So that's 3%. And then I'd like to ask Mr. Gwynn, I know we've got a $730 million annual M&O budget. So let's just say it's roughly $60 million a month. Do we have $180 million in the rainy day fund, our own rainy day fund, the fund balance, Mr. Gwynn?
Yes, sir. Right now we have calculated out and we do have 90 days fund balance reserve set aside.
All right, so we can cover this, and I want to add on to Dr. Dupree's assurances that we're not going to have a reduction in force, not going to have one. But in 2010, the Texas legislature cast a covetous eye on the fund balances of all the school districts in Texas and wanted us to use those fund balances to make up the shortfall they had at that time, which they were unsuccessful in doing, and which would have been catastrophic, because if we consider ourselves a family, every family is trying to have at least 90 days reserve for issues like we're dealing with right now. And once we spend that money, it'll take a long time to get it back. So hopefully we will prevail in imploring the Commissioner of Education to extend the window. But I am concerned, as you pointed out, Dr. Dupree, if a lot of these students have disappeared, we may never get them back. And so we'll have to think about that for the next school year, the next budget, and how that's going to be funded. And I also want to point out that because of House Bill 3, we had this year, if my memory is correct, the appraised value within the Fort Bend Independent School District political subdivision increased by a total of 7% of value, probably $44 billion. We're only able to take advantage of 2.5%. Now, if we were the city of Sugar Land, we would be able to take advantage of 3.5% of the increase in property values. But the school districts are locked in at 2.5%. And from Mr. Gwynn's previous explanations, if you took an average style home of, I think it was $270,000, they're saving about $48 a year in taxes, in Fort Bend ISD taxes. So if you're careful, you can visit Starbucks once a month for a year and spend your savings. So, and if your house was double that, theoretically, you could go twice a month. So I think it's important to kind of put these things in perspective. And I want to make these comments just to get us thinking about next year and what we're going to do with the budget. And also for our friends and neighbors at home, you all need to be aware that the state's faced a significant shortfall in revenue. 60% of the budget comes from sales tax revenue, and that's off. It's off considerably. So that's really all I have to say, Dr. Dupree. Thank you for this time, and thank you for your efforts, and thank you everybody for the nice presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Next is Mrs. Allison Drew.
Thank you, President Burdine. Thank you, Dr. Dupree and staff for that presentation. It was really, it was really informational. It really brought us up to speed on the things that you guys are doing. And as I listened to the comments, both from the call-in speakers and from my fellow board members, I can't help but speak directly to some of the things that were being said, and just really call out fine arts and some of the struggles that fine arts athletics have had. at the end of the day, one of the things that I definitely know is that our fine arts teachers are all about inclusion. And that's what fine arts is primarily about. And I can pass by my, a set of twins in the district, and I can pass by their computer at any time. And I see these fine arts teachers just pulling it out of the, just pulling it out of the hat. They've got big boom mics, they're paying for stuff all on their own, and they're really just trying to keep their programs together. So I have to say that I applaud the district's pivot here. I mean, Ms. Heiliger spoke last board meeting and said, hey, look, you know, if we're doing something that's not going in the right direction, will we own it and move forward? And I have to say that that's the one thing that I definitely can applaud about this district over and over again. And so we're about community inclusion. We're about working towards a solution that works for everyone during a time where we might not know all the factors. We might be moving fast. We might not be able to collaborate in the ways that we normally would collaborate, but we continue to move forward for the benefit of students, to retain our teachers, and to celebrate what we are as a district. So I'm just gonna stop here with that one. So my real questions come from questions that different people throughout the district have reached out to me and asked about. And one of the questions that I had was, one of the parents that want to send their children back to athletics asked me about rapid testing and whether we would be doing that as a district. And I really wanted to have you elaborate on what the district would be doing and, you know, how we'll be approaching that.
Joe, can you speak to that, please?
Yes, Dr. Dupree, and I'm going to have Athletic Director Dina Scott also join me in this conversation. Ms. Drew, so at this time with rapid testing, I know that there's been some research that has been done to see what different organizations can provide rapid testing. I know Dina Scott has been working with individuals from some of our SEL departments as well to try to get some of that information. Athletic Director Scott, can you speak to some of the research and your findings?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Dupree. Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. What we have found that is the testing is not necessarily needed on those that are asymptomatic with the testing for the student athletes during the prior to the athletic events. And therefore, we're not recommending that the athletes are rapid tested before the athletic events.
What are you seeing in neighboring districts?
We have surveyed neighboring districts and none are doing any type of rapid testing at this time.
Thank you. One of my next questions, thank you so much for that. One of my next questions really moves towards just really helping parents plan, and if at this time you know at all when students will receive their changed schedules, if you could speak, if anyone could speak to that, like when can we expect that parents will be informed about the changes to schedules and so on?
Melissa, Deanna, Joe?
Melissa, are you on? I know that she had very few, there was very little power in her.
Yep. She's out of power and she's switching over. So I'd ask Brett, can you address that?
Well, I can address it.
I can
based
answer
on,
that question.
Go ahead.
So the elementary schedules will be shared with parents starting September 25th. And the secondary schedules will be shared starting October 2nd. And that's when they will know what their new assignments are with their teachers.
Thank you for that. I think that that's going to help a lot of parents to plan and to really just start to prepare for the changes. And probably my last question really is surrounding looking a little bit forward and really trying to understand where we're going. Do we have any data on how students are doing right now? Are we able to speak to how students are doing? And, you know, specifically, one of my concerns is that we're working through refining so many things at once. And one of the things that I don't want to have fall off of our plate are the students that are online. The almost 90% of the students that are online, how are they doing? What's our data behind that? Are we seeing that the ones that are online are doing well? You know, what are we doing for gap control early on?
I see that Melissa is working on connecting. Are you there, Melissa?
Getting our sound on, Deanna.
Okay, I think I'm set up now.
There you go. Thank you for your patience.
Of course.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Drew. So the question was about how are the kids doing and how are we able to indicate that the kids in the online environment are doing well?
Yes, are we tracking that? What's the data there? Do we have any insights? I mean, I'm really concerned that we kind of, you know, are working through all of these other things that we definitely need to refine, but then we make it to January and there's a whole bunch of kids that just, you know, didn't do well in an online environment or just have a huge gap. How are we tracking that and what are we doing?
Okay, thank you for asking that question. So one of the things that we are doing is the Renaissance 360 data. We've finally gotten to a point where we've got those kids tested and we're going to start to analyze the data related to those instructional gaps that may have occurred over the break, right? And through that term 4 transition. And we're going to be doing some historical data analysis with that in comparison to where the kids came in last year. So that's one data point we're using. The other thing we're going to be analyzing here soon is the second progress report, right, is coming up on the 25th. So we'll be able to look at some grade reporting there and look at, you know, your traditional failure reports. Do we have kids? Is that typical? Is it higher than normal because the kids aren't doing well in the online environment? Is it staying pretty consistent with what we would typically see during this time frame? So we're looking at both of those indicators right now to see how kids are doing in that online environment.
Great. And so I guess to just qualify a little bit more, if you start to see something that is more, that's higher than you would have expected, what's our mitigation there? What's our plan? What's the course forward?
So we would be, if things are higher than, like failure rates or things are higher than what we would typically see or want to see, we would start dissecting that data by, is it a campus? Like, are we noticing it at a specific campus? And then if it's holistic, then what is contributing to that factor? Sorry, now there's a fire truck going by.
I know.
So
real life in Portland ISD.
Passing by you.
So we would, sorry if you don't laugh, right? So, so we would look at it, holistically. We would see, is there a campus specific issue? If it is, then we would work in partnership with the Department of School Leadership to determine, what were the contributing factors to that. If it was more of a district-wide issue, we might need to look at audit some courses to determine Is there alignment to the curriculum? Are there further curriculum supports that are needed to make sure that the online curriculum is what it needs to be, or that the teachers have access to exemplars or guidance in that online environment? So there's a number of different things I think that we would have to do, but we'd have to start with the data to see if it was a holistic issue or if it was a campus-based issue, so that we could work together to address it.
Thank you, and thank you for explaining all of that. One of the things that I guess the additional comment that I would have there is that as we have parents that are kind of, you know, assisting and supporting in the online environment, that, you know, it would be helpful to know sooner rather than later that there's more support needed, or that there's more that there's something going wrong. So anything that we can do to assist with that, and also with anything that might happen in the face-to-face environment, because it's just so different right now. So, but I thank you guys for being on top of that and having systems in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Drew.
Thank you, Ms. Drew. Mr. Rosenthal, whenever you're ready, sir.
Thank you, sir. I think we got, what, a few days and 3 months left of this year. You know, COVID, tropical storm, a power outage during a meeting. This is going to end soon. So anyway, thank you, Allison. Those were excellent questions that you just asked. And I hope, Dr. Dupree, that we will be seeing some of those, some updates on student success soon. And, you know, as soon as you get those, as soon as those are available. I also like to comment that I'm the other question that Allison asked Dr. Scott about the rapid testing. And so I'm glad we're not doing that. And there's a reason that seems like nobody else is doing that either, because those tests are can be wildly inaccurate. I hate to see us, you know, deny opportunities to people because of false positives or false negatives. Anyway, I'd also like to thank Allison, Grail, and Kristen for the comments concerning guidelines. And Grail, you specifically brought up policy, which is what I was going to do as well. And I think perhaps we could support the district's effort in this case by either maybe beefing up policy. I'm not sure that comes under the one that you discussed or not. We really have to take a look at that. Or maybe creating something new just to enforce, or to not to enforce, but to really kind of set a standard for consistent guidelines throughout the district. I think that would take a lot of pressure off individual departments. And so I think that's something we should look at. We do have a policy meeting next week, and perhaps we can, you and Ms. Drew can discuss that kind of offline in our policy discussion. So I think that will be very helpful, because we really do need consistency across the district, and we need to provide as much opportunity as possible for, and I don't even like to use the word extracurricular anymore. I like to use the word co-curricular, because it's so embedded in these students, and it's so much. It's such a huge. It has such a huge impact on their lives while they're here in school, and you know, once their time, especially the high school kids, once their time is over, they may never have opportunities to do this again. So I feel very passionate about that. Let's see, let me go through my list here. Have in the very beginning of the presentation, we talked about technology adjustments as we phase in online kids. The example was given, I think, by Ms. Hubbard. And I wanted to make sure that we've actually tested those things, or soon to test them before they go into effect, just to make sure that those transitions will go seamlessly.
We have Mr. Dave Rosenthal, but however, like I say, it's one of those where if anything, a number of things can happen in terms of the synchronizing between the Skyward database and the building of the Schoology, as well as the Teams setup within Microsoft. So we have tested thoroughly. Like I say, again, we don't know exactly what may fall off. And that's the only thing for cautionary measure.
All right. I mean, as long as you've gone through your first phase of making sure that you think this will work, and that's you know, there's always things that pop up that.
It does work because we did that at beginning of the school years. That's how we build most of our schedule and also all of the teams within Schoology as well and Microsoft Teams. And we use exact same type of methods to sync up the databases.
Okay, excellent. I also want to touch a little bit about I'm just going to use the word cheating. I think that Respondus, I guess maybe it will do some good for some people, but I think, as I said last week, I'm staring at my laptop into this in our meeting here, and yet I've got my desktop, my phone, and so you know the Respondus software it only works when the student only has one device that they're currently working on. And you can see my desktop just went out. That's why the shadow came. I think I'm glad that you are exploring different things. You know, I don't know if having students take major exams like at a central location, if it's safe to do that, or maybe split them up somehow. You know, some other type of monitoring. But I do think that it's a serious situation and it needs to be addressed. So thank you for looking into that a little more and responding.
Mr. Rosenthal, so I also reaching out to all of the CTOs and CIOs with the K-12, and we're trying to find out what's the best practice out there. As you know, the TA has made Schoology available to most of all, if not all, school district within Texas. And so Respondus is one of the one that integrate with Schoology. For example, Klein use them exactly how we using them.
Right.
The only thing that they would do differently is that they created a classroom available for kids from remote to come in to take the tests if they choose that way.
Okay. Yeah, as I said, that's good to lock down laptops, you know, but again, there's, you know, a lot of students will have access to other devices that you cannot lock down with,
Yes,
like with that program. So that's why, you know, I brought
Yeah,
that.
as a matter of fact, my youngest son is taking Wharton during summer, and then also U of H. They use Respondus lockdown browser as well.
Okay. Okay. The other question I have is, Ms. James brought up masks, and will students who go back face to face and are sitting in a classroom, will they be required at all ages to wear masks full time?
Yes, students are required to wear masks in the classroom, provided that there is not a special needs reason why they're not able to wear the mask. And even if they are 6 feet or greater apart from each other, the expectation is that masks are worn by all students and staff.
Okay, and is that true for students who are under 10?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that differs a little bit from Abbott's mask order. And so has anyone considered giving students a chance to, other than just recess period, to go outside or something, just to take a break and breathe for a couple seconds? Because I do not want to wade into the mask controversy at all. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just asking, because that is a long period of time to sit with a mask. And I just want to know if that's been considered or anybody's thought about that.
That's great feedback. When we think about what's best practice in brain breaks and you know, physical movement and the restrictions that they'll have in the classroom in terms of that physical movement that's typical in a face-to-face situation, we'll certainly take that back to the team and work that through the communication processes to include in our best practices.
Especially the younger And I
Right.
know I brought this up in the past, when we spoken about, recess time and whatnot, but when I was a little kid in grade school, we had 3 recess periods, and, I'd like to think I turned out okay. So I don't know, others may have different opinions, but anyway, I think I did want to talk about the pandemic management plan, but if anybody else has any comments, I'll stop and then ask questions about that after everyone's done. So,
Mrs. Helliger, did you have some questions or comments you'd like to make, ma'am?
I'm trying to get, I apologize. Because I was kicked out of the Zoom. I'm having to hold a cell phone and I just can't hold a cell phone for the extended period of time of the meeting. But really and truly, I mean, tonight's conversation was really, really good. I think my other board members have asked a lot of great questions, and some of the things that I had already had in my mind, especially around equitability, around the arts, as well as the kids going back to school, well, especially the playing of the sports and whatnot. So my questions for the most part have been asked. I just, want to make sure that even though people might differ on the expectations of the mask and those kind of things, we just have to, do what's best for all of our kids and our teachers, because, teachers are concerned. I get emails and texts on a regular basis concerning, or even calls concerning where we are with our current COVID-19 cases, and they're watching our website very closely. And so I think as we move forward on the 23rd to bring our school community back on in face-to-face, I think that will be something that we will be definitely continue to watch closely. And I'm interested to see how, we respond accordingly to any of those major changes into those numbers. But I am all for, and I'm excited about us getting back to face-to-face. I'm also excited about our district having the ability to do 2 different types of modality. I mean, we've talked about this as a school board many years around making sure that our students are being competitive, and being competitive, the different modalities allow us to do that. I mean, right now we are preparing ourselves from a pandemic perspective, but I also see this as something that we can do, long term, to give our students even greater opportunities to experience different classes that maybe they're not able to take at the particular school. I mean, I just see it as a win-win situation for us, even though we're going through this current, situation now. But what we'll be learning through this process, I think, will definitely be better. We will come out of this better as a district. So I just wanted to kind of share that. I do have some detailed questions around some of the day-to-day operations, but I'll send those directly to Dr. Dupree and his staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Helliger. Mr. Rosenthal, I'll let you follow up here in just a second, but I wanted to make a few comments if I could. And I agree with Ms. Helliger. I think we had some great conversation tonight as a board. And I am proud of our district for basically running 2 districts in one now. If you look at it that way, I know we have a lot of people that cross over, but it's a different business model. And so I appreciate the efforts in that. I don't want to belabor this, but I did want to follow up with something that Mr. Rosenthal was saying about mask. And I haven't mentioned this, but I just want someone to think about this, or admin to think about this, but masks work when they're worn correctly. in the medical profession, masks are changed several times a day. And, my question really comes at, because I have a 6 and a 9-year-old who are in 1st and 4th grade, they don't keep their mask on all day long. They take their mask off, they twirl them around, they touch door handles, they touch their mask. They throw them on other kids, and they're just kids. And Extended Day did a wonderful job this summer. Both of my kids attended Extended Day, and they did a great job of doing the best they could to manage that. But our reality is kids are kids, and if we're really trying to be careful and we're trying to be mindful of not spreading disease or germs, do we have any protocol in place that, I should ask, how do we know that kids are washing their mask, or that they're changing them every day? Or do we have masks readily available in the classroom, so when the kid drops it in the restroom and then picks it back up and throws it at his friend? I know these are things that we can't all control, but for a certain age, that's our reality. And so that's really a lot of several rhetorical questions, but I just wanted to make that point that we need to consider that when we do our planning for a specific age, as Mr. Rosenthal said. So I won't continue that, but I just want to make that point. So do we have y'all talked about what that may look like as far as ensuring that students are coming with a clean mask every day?
Part of the planning includes an inventory of PPE at the campus level so that we can ensure if there's any question, we can provide a face covering for the students.
Okay, but I guess there's no way for us to tell whether or not that it's the same mask they've been wearing for 2 or 3 weeks. I'm guilty of that. I've got one in my vehicle that I'll wash every week or so, but it's not, I wear it for several days in a row, and it's, I don't know what that looks like, but I just wanted to bring that up, especially for elementary school kids, because they're just not going to be able to do it all day long. That's our reality.
That's a
So,
great point.
With that being said, Mr. Rosenthal, would you like to make a few more or a quick comment before we move along? You're muted, sir.
Sorry.
No
I was
worries.
saying I can't promise quick, but I'll see what I can do. So Dr. Dupree, I'm looking at the pandemic management plan indicator descriptions. And the first one under internal data, district indications, it says student COVID tracking data report via self-reporting, same for employee. And it said this indicator provides data within the last 14 days regarding the number of new, which is bolded and capitalized, employee online and face-to-face, parentheses, and new student online face-to-face cases of COVID-19 as self-reported by the employees and students. So I'm struggling to understand what that is, what is meant within the parentheses.
Gwen, can you speak to that?
Mr. Rosenthal, are you looking at the description for the first indicator?
Yes.
Under the district? Okay. So the first indicator describes the number of new positive cases by employee and by student. So we have, excuse me, we have a team of people who is tracking the number of new cases each day. And that dashboard is intended to show us over a 14-day period compared to the previous 14-day period, what the increase or decrease is for our employee group and our student group.
Right, I understand that. So I guess let me phrase my question this way. It says online and face-to-face. Now, are we tracking COVID cases for kids who are completely 100% online and will never be in our building?
Yes, so, excuse me, I apologize. So the team of people that are tracking for students is our comprehensive health, so our social emotional learning area. And I'm gonna pass this on to Pilar or Lori to give you a better idea of how they go about tracking student new positive cases online or face-to-face.
Laura, do you want me to take that?
Go ahead.
Sure, yes, we are currently contact tracing any student in the district that self-reports any COVID-related issue, whether they're symptomatic, whether they're an exposure, or if they are positive. Just in the case of if they were to want to return to any activity or come back to face-to-face learning, we would have all the data on every student possible.
I would like to add as well that we do have some situations where we may have a family that has some students that are face-to-face and some that are online within the same household. And so if there were to be a confirmed positive for the online student, there could be an impact to the face-to-face. And to Lori's point as well, we do have some students that are online and may be accessing fine arts activities or athletic activities. So we want to make sure that when they're self-reporting that we have a good count, and it helps us with our data to know kind of what we're looking at in terms of as a whole, the students who may be confirmed positive.
Yeah, so I think your first answer, I agree with. The rest of it, I don't think it's really necessarily our business to know what's going on with kids who have no intention or will not step into a Fort Bend ISD facility. But I appreciate, again, your answer, where perhaps there's a student who is online and another student in the same household that does do face-to-face. So I think that's where that might be important, but the others, I don't buy into. And so since you brought up the dashboard, and I'm glad that Addie mentioned this, because it sounds like what she was saying was that people are looking at this. And so I think it's important that we understand what's being posted here. So, for example, I don't know if anybody has the dashboard up, but I'm just looking at what you sent. I'm looking at the board update, and so you have snapshots of all that stuff. That's where I'm looking. So if anybody wants to, my colleagues or staff want to follow along, this is where I'm at. So you have an example from the dashboard. And so let's say, for example, on September 2nd, there were, let's use another one. Let's use, say, it doesn't really matter, but just say September 10th. This is the graph that shows student positive cases 14-day trend. It shows 2 cases that day, so September 10th. So can somebody tell me what that means?
Mr. Rosenthal, I'm going to tell you, the staff is not prepared to have this conversation this evening because this is not on the agenda. And I understand it's broadly part of the COVID conversation, but if we would rather have this conversation, we can actually be prepared to answer this level of detailed questions.
Well, I don't know. I would disagree. I would say we're talking about masks and we're talking about other things. So,
I mean, I'm happy to provide detailed follow-up to your questions about the dashboard, but staff is not prepared to get into that level of detail this evening.
okay, so perhaps we will talk about it at our next meeting. I will ask when we get to the agenda item, or future agenda items, I will ask to put this on the agenda.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Appreciate your comments. All right, moving along, we're going to go into closed session. Actually, I'm sorry, Dr. Dupree, on the agenda 6A2, we have a procurement update. Is there anything that we need to discuss?
Brian, could you go over that, please?
Yes, sir. So good evening, Mr. President and members of the board. You'll recall that in March, you all approved a resolution of emergency declaration, and we indicated we would report back to you all on purchases made under that declaration. And to date, the district has spent $541,333.16. And of that, $458,954 was in August. And the majority of that expenditure, $454,000, was paid to Region 4 for wireless hotspots through Operation Connectivity, and the remaining $4,500 was for disinfecting and safety seals. So as it relates to the Region 4 expenditure, we have already received a payment of $227,200 from Fort Bend County CARES Act funding that reimbursed a portion of that. And because we received that funding from the county, TEA will make up the remaining portion as part of the matching component that's included as part of Operation Connectivity. So that expenditure will be 100% reimbursed to the district. And that concludes the report, and I can answer any questions the board may have.
Mr. Gwynn, if I may, you cut out for a minute on my side here. What was it that's going to be paid for 100%?
The payment to Region 4 for $454,000 is going to be 100% reimbursed. The district will not pay anything out of pocket for that once those reimbursements are received.
Okay. Did we have any questions or comments about that? All right. Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Gwynn. Appreciate the update. We will now convene in closed session under the Texas Open Meeting Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551, under the following sections for the purpose of private consultation with the board's attorney on any or all subject matters authorized by law, to consider purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, personnel matters, security matters, student discipline matter, or complaint. We are now convened in closed session.
Texas state law has standing on school buses in motion. Texas Transportation Code Section 545 states that a person may not operate a school bus if the number of passengers exceeds the maximum capacity of the bus. If any person is standing in the bus, or if the person is seated in a place that is not designed at the state. Texas Education Code Section 30 states that a school district shall not require any child to stand on school bus. While seated, students are expected to face forward. When students are seated properly, they remain fully within the safety envelope as part of the design standard for schools. School buses are designed to be safe partner. This concept makes
Tristan, you need to mute your mic.
Everyone here? All right. We are now reconvened in open session. We will consider action on 2 closed session items. Mrs. James, whenever you're ready.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Burdine. I move that the Board of Trustees approve and authorize the superintendent to execute the the settlement agreement with Marcus Bailey and Liza Bailey individually and on behalf of LB as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. James and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, please vote. I'm going to call your name. When I call your name, please state your name before you vote yay or nay. Mrs. Allison Drew.
This is Allison Drew, and I vote yay.
Mrs. Addie Helliger.
This is Addie Helliger, and I vote yay.
Mrs. Grail James.
This is Grail James, and I vote yay.
Mr. Jim Rice.
This is Jim Rice. I vote yay.
Mr. Dave Rosenthal.
Dave Rosenthal, I vote yay.
Mrs. Kristen Taussand.
This is Kristen Taussand, and I vote yay.
This is Jason Burdine, and I also vote yay. This motion passes. Mrs. Drew, whenever you're ready, ma'am.
I move that the Board of Trustees approve Maya Thornton to the position of Director of Materials Management.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Drew and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, please vote. When I call your name, please state your name before you vote yay or nay. Mrs. Allison Drew.
This is Allison Drew, and I vote yay.
Mrs. Addie Helliger.
This is Addie Helliger, and I vote yay.
Mrs. Grail James.
This is Grail James, and I vote yay.
Mr. Jim Rice.
This is Jim Rice. I vote yay.
Mr. Dave Rosenthal.
Dave Rosenthal, I vote yay.
Mrs. Kristen Taussand.
This is Kristen Taussand, and I vote yay.
This is Jason Burdine. I also vote yay. Motion passes. We will now move along to our board member report. Mr. Rosenthal. Our board activity report, excuse me. Mr. Rosenthal, whenever you're ready, sir. You're muted, Mr. Rosenthal.
Hang on one second. I've got to find it.
No worries.
I shut it down. I know Mr. Rozier sent that. Let's see. And if you would like to send it again, that would be great. Let's see. Here we go. I got it. Got it. Okay. Let's see. We had the Houston Hispanic Chamber of Commerce's Reopening Schools in Houston Facebook Live event. The Ismaili Jamankana Center Outlook on Education, Learning and Teaching in the COVID-19 Era Facebook Live event, FBISD Shack virtual meeting, Addie's Book Day video shoot, 22nd Annual Back to School Scramble, Board Workshop Meeting, Public Budget Hearing, Fort Bend Chamber of Commerce, State of the County Luncheon, Fort Bend Student Leadership 101 Cohort Session 1, Found and Not Forgotten, the Sugarland 95 Zoom event, Pandemic Stakeholder Advisory Committee meetings, Go Public Gulf Coast Steering Committee meeting, and the Fort Bend Chamber of Commerce hosts Senator Lois Kolkhorst, Coronavirus Implications for the 87th Texas Legislature. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. We appreciate the report. We do not have anyone signed up to give a special report tonight, but that doesn't mean we can't. Do we have anyone that would like to give a special report on the board?
Mr. Burdine.
Yes, sir, please.
I would like to make one comment about last Friday's presentation. Mrs. Chastity Olanu Alade presented the Sugarland 95 Found but Not Forgotten. She did an extremely good job, very compelling story. It's clear she did an extraordinary amount of research, and I thought represented Fort Bend ISD and the Sugarland 95 and humanity very well. I wanted everyone to know that.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Thank you for being a part of that and a part of the Education Foundation with the Chamber of Commerce and helping put all that together. So, and I also wanted to thank all the fellow trustees who were able to make that meeting. I was not, but I heard some great things about it. To my understanding, she's going to forward us the presentation so we can all review that at our own convenience. And I look forward to seeing that. Next on the agenda is to review our future board meeting agenda items, Dr. Dupree.
Yes, sir. We have a meeting coming up to the next Monday. We actually have the superintendent formative conversation. That's the informal meeting. We'll be coming back on October 28th for the formal annual summative evaluation. But I'll be finalizing the agenda for next Monday with Mr. Burdine tomorrow, and we'll send some information out or middle of the week on that. Then we'll get to our normal cycle in October. We'll have the COVID update. Mr. Rosenthal, I did hear you say earlier, and I want to make sure I'm understanding you. You'd like to have a specific presentation and discussion about the dashboard and the pandemic management plan, about the elements of that.
Yes.
Is that, so we'll have that ready as part of that conversation, along with other information related to kind of the opening of schools.
Great.
We'll do the 1920 student achievement report, and we'll have some more student data that you have asked about by that time. We'll be prepared to present that information in October about where our students are, how they're doing this year, and how we're addressing that. The analysis that you heard addressed during the meeting will be underway or significantly finished by that point. And then we also, with the election coming in November, the board will be doing we'll be announcing the board continuing education update, which is our normal just prior to the election. If we're able to do so, if we're able to engage the board's legislative liaison in the next couple of weeks, we'll be working to move toward approving the legislative priorities in either October or November. So we'll be working on that in the near future. And then I mentioned the summative evaluation on October 28th. And then November, we'll start looking a little more routine with Early Literacy Center, Early Intervention Academy, and Pre-K expansion update, quarterly financial update, approving the CAFR, the annual financial report, along with our campus improvement plan, goals and objectives for the year, and the instrument for the superintendent evaluation. And then as you move into December, we'll be doing the special education update and the annual FIRST report. So those are the things we have scheduled at this point, at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Dupree. Appreciate the update. Next on the agenda is our adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
You have a motion by Mrs. Helliger and a second by Mrs. Tossan. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you and good evening.